Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to the Advancement Podcast. My name is Todd Barham, and I'm here with Tim Ware, the president of Advancement. And
what is up with all that so much emphasis?
Because I'm here on the podcast.
He is taking it to a new level.
Yeah. I'm trying to give good diction. And we're also joined by the illustrious former, now on this episode, co-host, Reverend Taylor Choate.
Esquire,
PhD, MA.
So this is
A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3.
It's easy as 1, 2, 3.
Isn't that? Oh, he's got little kids. Y'all, ABC.
Do, re, mi. I was singing the Michael Jackson ABC.
That's what I'm.
Easiest. That was back when you were a kid. Oh,
it is when I was a kid. You're right. I'll own that.
Back in the 50s. I mean,
whoa. I was not alive in the 50s. I'm a man who is in his 50s. There is a substantial difference in those two things.
In the 60s.
Wow. Man.
It's getting deep. It's getting deep.
So here we are in the middle of a kind of a mini series on transition as we start off 2020.
We're
at Mug on the Square.
Hey, Mug on the Square. Woo!
Yeah, thank you, Mug on the Square.
Got to do this.
Yep, got the sign
white.
And we're still on Taylor time. It's January, but there's a Christmas tree behind us. But Taylor's one of those that you have Christmas trees goes up November 1.
Yeah.
And comes down somewhere around January 20th.
31st.
Go all the way, huh?
Yeah.
The whole month.
You'll be happy, Taylor. In some of the later episodes in January, you'll probably hear Christmas music because we were shooting here and I almost said choating. We were choating here. We were shooting here and they had Christmas music blasting.
They can't hear the background noise that well. You don't have to give them all our secrets.
Maybe just a little bit. It's this high quality equipment.
This is a minor detail. As I'm transitioning off the podcast, I want all of our listeners to know that the pronunciation of my last name is actually with a SH. So it's
Choate. It's not Choate.
It's not there. The C is like that good deacon in your church. It's there, but you don't say it that way. You don't pronounce it that way. I don't know. That analogy didn't really run well.
Because see, if it were my deacons, it would be Hote. They're not there, so.
We were talking about transitions a minute ago. How do we transition these things? Well, since Taylor's a remote and we're local, we could just transition him by hitting a button, and he's like, he's gone.
Press of a button, Taylor has transitioned.
He's gone. Transition has happened. So last time we were talking about why we make transitions. We went through a little bit of evaluation. And really, the truth is, we landed on the thing that we have to keep a kingdom mindset in transitions. But one of the things that I think is important for us to talk about, and I'd like us to dialogue around, is the idea of transitioning. Because as leaders, we're going to have to facilitate transitions, and every one of us that are here on the podcast and every minister that's out there has had to leave somewhere. When they may have been a lead pastor leaving to go to another lead pastorate, or they may have been a subordinate pastor leaving for another, or subordinate staff member leaving for another position. And transitions can be clean and move the kingdom forward gracefully, or they can be ugly and painful and move the kingdom forward in an arduous way.
Yeah. Or it could really hurt the church.
Yeah.
In a difficult way.
So the question becomes, how do we So let's just spend some time talking about transitioning. So we want to start being the leader transitioning, or talk about being the person in the midst of the transition. Where do y'all want to start?
Oh, I say we start with the leader.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Because then we can clearly define.
As a guy, Todd, who has had 4 transitions in his church this year, and you've been leading these transitions out.
I need a hug.
I don't know that I have it in me.
Yeah.
But
well, I've been getting fan mail. I'm just kidding. No podcasts have come out yet. Nobody knows about it.
but that idea of transitioning out of, so let's just start with you. What are the things that we all wish would happen when in a exit to help the church?
Man, I wish people would just be up front from the get-go. I mean, especially with me, I know each leader is different, but I'm just the person that I want someone to just be up front with me. Say, hey, God's moving me out of somewhere. God's placed this on my heart, and I want to do what's best for this church, and I want to help you. And it would help me if they would, one, let me know from the get-go so we can begin to work on a plan for their transition. And it would also help me if during that time they continue to serve at a level that is high. Because I need them to finish well, not just leave me and just kind of leave a trail of fires to be put out behind them, but I need them to lead well, even during that time up until the point that God moves them on to their next location.
So here would be the question: how far out do we want to know that the Lord's speaking to them? Is it if the Lord begins to speak to them and they say, well, I don't know what it looks like, Pastor, but the Lord's putting this in my heart, and it might be a year, it might be 2 years. I'm not sure, but I sense God saying there's something different. Do you want it that, or are we talking 6 weeks? Where's the balance?
I mean, I've never had someone come to me with a year. I mean, I think a year would be easy, because then you can begin to look for someone, and maybe they may be even able to train their own replacement. But I think at a bare minimum, a month would help. A month to 2 months would be ideal for me, because I mean, you've got to start, in our circles. I mean, the circles that we run in, I can make 4 or 5 texts and get some candidates for positions that I'm looking for pretty quickly, but you have to find the time and ask those people and have time to interview, time to bring people in, time for them to meet with the board. Transitions just take time, and the more time I have, the less rushed I feel.
Well, now the flip side
Tim,
of it. So, go ahead.
I think I have a great question for us to dialogue about in this.
Bring it,
Todd,
baby.
as a lead pastor, what do you want to say to somebody on your team that's considering a transition? Like you've kind of answered it, but I want to frame it in that way. Like, what do you wish your team knew about their transition before coming to you?
Okay. Well, one thing I wish that my team knew is, number one, regardless of what you think about me, your departure is going to affect me, because I've loved you. I've cared about you. You've been a part of this ministry the whole time. And no matter whether you think it will or not, it's going to impact me, and I'm going to miss you, number one. And number two, it would be easier for me to know what your plans are as you're planning it, rather than find out later. One thing that does hurt me is that I've found out from time to time that a lot of members that have exited have talked to other people about it before me, when I thought, well, I'm supposed to be their pastor. I'm supposed to be their confidant. And I would love to have maybe even given them wisdom during this time. I think back, one of the best transitions I had was one of our first youth pastors. He came to me and he was getting married, and it was understandable. He said, I'm getting married. This is a part-time gig, and I need to try to find a full-time gig. I completely understood. In fact, I helped him find a job, and he helped me find his replacement. And so that was one of the best transitions I had. Now, Do I miss him? Sure. We still stay in contact. He now has a baby, and I stay in contact with him and his wife. We have a relationship with them still, but I want people, what I would want them to know is, this is a transition for me, and it's just as hard on me as it's going to be for you and your family, but I want to help you. Now, I know not all pastors are going to feel that way, but
well, I think that's the flip side of it, because I think most pastors would say or think they would say what you just said.
Yeah.
But I don't know that behavior, most pastors, starting with the fact that it hurts,
yeah,
most guys just say, well, go. When they hear you want to leave, it's more about, well, just go ahead and leave.
Yeah.
And which is why we talked about that the last time, about this loyalty piece, because that's a great, healthy mindset. But there's a flip side to it, that when you transition, okay, when somebody leaves short and you don't have notice, if this is a value that I have as a leader, let's make a plan. Let's talk about this. Let's take 3, 4, 5, 6 months, a year, and let's work this out together so that God's kingdom advances in your life, in my life, and in this church, and in the next place you're going in the best way. If you leave short, you don't allow me to walk out that value with your replacement, where he's coming from. Now you're forcing me to push them into a short transition there, which causes there's these ripple effects of short, radical transitions. And it starts in the body of Christ.
It also doesn't give me time to honor you well. The more time, the quicker you are trying to get out of there, it's hard for me to honor you, because scheduling times to have a get together or a banquet in your honor or whatever, that takes time and that takes logistics. And if you're leaving short, I don't have time to honor you and to honor what you have done for this church. And so if you don't give me time, then I don't have time to honor what you've done for us as well.
Well, you brought up something else that was very interesting, because you kind of put it in the context of somebody that feels like God's asking them to leave the church.
Yeah.
Somebody that's, because there's one of the greatest pains that pastors feel is the day the person walks in and says, hey, pastor, let's have lunch. And then you sit down at lunch and they go, we're leaving the church.
Yeah.
Next Sunday's our last Sunday.
Yeah.
And you go,
awesome.
Yeah. You expect me to be overjoyed and to feel good about this.
Yeah. Give me a hug. I'm so excited.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder sometimes, this is hypothetical, I wonder if sometimes the reason that pastors frame staff transitions in such an abrupt way is because of congregational transitions.
Yeah.
If there's a connection between the two.
Well, I think part of it is we get so conditioned with people leaving badly that we just expect everyone to lead badly.
Yeah.
Because let's just be honest, in our society and the way things are going now, most people, the majority of the people, leave your church badly. And so you become so conditioned, so hardened, maybe is a better word, to that you just expect everyone to leave you badly. And when someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to leave well, you're like, are you really? Are you sure about that? Especially for me, I've really had to fight a bit of a paranoia this year, because we've had with our transitions, we've had several families leave the church and pop smoke as it's called, and get mad at me on their way out. And so I've had to fight being paranoid of people coming to me with criticism, so to speak, that maybe was intended to push the church forward. I instantly go to, well, darn, I mean, or are they going to leave the church too?
Yeah.
And you fight that as well.
That's a good observation. Did he answer your question, Taylor?
Yeah. What I made a note here as I was thinking. I don't know. This is not a Taylor thing. So I don't want to take credit for this, but I've read it somewhere or heard it said, the best way to manage a transition, a staff member leaving, a pastor leaving his church to go somewhere else, is to decide on how you're going to manage it when you start. So
Right.
when you hire a new pastor, when a church hires a new lead pastor, or a pastor hires a staff pastor, let's just go ahead and have a conversation right up front. Hey, there may be a day that you got an opportunity, things don't feel right for you here, it's not clicking. Let's talk about how I can approach you with this. Let's talk about how you're going to approach me with this, and let's play out some scenarios. And I think that would make it so much easier on the front end if we talked about what was right and wrong on transitions when there's not a transition right in front of us.
Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant thought. You know, I remember the story of a Baptist pastor. He was in Oklahoma, and he told his church, I feel like God's saying that it's time for us. We're going to be transitioning out. And he was open to the congregation. He says, I don't know though. He said, God hasn't spoken to us, but we're just going to prepare the ground. And they were open, and a pulpit committee came in the back.
Yeah.
And there were people said, are y'all pulpit committee? Oh, we're so excited because God had prepared.
Oh, wow.
And they were excited that the pulpit committee came.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because the leader had said, this is what God is doing.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've had one in particular, my board member, that has come to me during this year, and it's been a rough year for me. It's been a rough year for the church. And I've had one of my board members come to me and go, you aren't leaving us, right? Because I think that even in these transitions, we don't remember the fact as leaders that this affects our people too. We're a bit narcissistic from the fact that it only affects ourselves. And it really kind of hit home to me. This board member's wife came to me and said, you're not going to leave us, are you? I know this has been a difficult year. You're not going to give up. She said, you're not going to give up on us, are you?
Yeah.
And I know that there's fear within people, even when these difficult things happen.
I think, Taylor, what you said, I don't know who said that, but that's brilliant. I'm going to put that into my everything from now on, that when you bring a staff member on, when in those early meetings, is let's just decide right now, let's lay the groundwork for transitioning out.
Yeah. You know, I had a pastor who, an opportunity had presented itself to me, and I went to him because I just have a value of honest communication. Just I don't ever want to hide or keep things. That's hard for me. Just so the world knows, I'm not a secret keeper. I understand confidentiality. Don't misconstrue that. But
so what'd you get me for Christmas, Taylor?
Yeah.
I can tell you what he got you for Christmas.
A Sagu Polo. A Sagu Polo. That's what he got me.
Okay, so I had this pastor, and I shared with him, there's an opportunity that's pretty lucrative and desirable and would be something I might be interested in. Let's talk about this. And so we talked about it, and he came, it wasn't long-term. It wasn't what I wanted to do, what was God's will for my life. But I remember him saying, he said, Taylor, just for the future, and he might have taken a different approach in this than you, Todd. He said, you don't have to come to me every time. In fact, he said, I don't want to know if you're considering, because I don't know that I can handle the relational struggle or the relational worry in my mind. He said, so when it's time, you come talk to me. So for me, in that season, it really has established that approach. I had another former pastor who just simply told me he wanted to know, like, hey, anytime because I want to help you. And so I think the dynamic of every lead pastor and every staff member and pastor church, just and the best book on this, and this may be where that principle came out of, is called Next by William Vanderbloemen.
Right.
I think that's where that came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. We have to understand everybody's going to be different, but I think the key to it is what you said, Taylor, is just being honest and open with people. Because people will take you well if they don't feel like you're trying to get one up on them or trying to pull the wool over their eyes, so to speak.
Yeah, it's just such it's so anti our culture though, this whole thing of, I want to know, I want to be a part of it, because to me, I have this value of transformation and growth. And I expect that transformation and growth is going to lead you to paths that we haven't seen yet. And I want to be a part of that journey for people, but it's not unfortunately, I don't think that's the norm in the American church.
It's not.
I think it's I think most pastors, unfortunately, view well, you're going to leave, then just go ahead, because which kind of gives a segue into when you're the person who is transitioning out. You said it earlier, you got to finish strong. I tell people, actually, Taylor can tell you, as he's transitioned from one ministry position to another, I've told him, I said, you have to leave better than you start.
Yeah.
Your last day has to be better than your first day.
So we're expecting a great podcast today, Taylor. Great. That's what we're expecting.
I'm shooting.
Yeah. What he said.
I'm giving you great content. You guys are cutting up over there.
But I think that, but the truth is, one of the phrases you hear in ministry circles is, once you've lifted your eyes, it's hard to come back to here.
Yeah.
I think, Tim, one thing in the couple transitions that I've gone through, especially especially one in particular that you were instrumental in helping me, and I think about is, I immediately sat down and made a list and at that time my pastor knew that transition is coming, and we've been talking about a timeline, but I made a list of all the things that I needed to be involved in or needed to finish between the time I was mentioned to my pastor and the time I was actually going to leave. And I kept that list on my desk and essentially said, until these things are done and concluded well, I can't be fully gone. I can't lift my eyes per se. I have to finish. These things have to be finished, because I think what happens, especially for young guys who are in their minds maybe going to a next level opportunity, you start thinking about that. Well, over here, I'm going to get to do this, or over here, my ministry is going to be broader or better or bigger budget, all that. And you forget that if God is true, and we know he is, that when he brought you to where you're currently at, he brought you there for an assignment as well as a season. And that you're not, I would put it like this: you're not allowed to leave until your assignment is done and your season has closed. And
right.
if that next place isn't for 3 months, then your assignment and season is still where you're at. So you have to be fully engaged. And it's I think maybe one of the most difficult things in ministry to do is to stay engaged in that moment.
So Taylor, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Would you say that, and this is kind of what I'm getting at, what you're saying, would you say that it would be sinful for us not to finish well because of the effects that it would have on God's church?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
Because
you put it in terms of sin. That's pretty strong.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna make this spiritual, we have to talk fully.
Well, I mean, you have to be able to look at the fact that Jesus is, there's a moment, and then he says, okay, it's finished.
Yeah.
Have we finished what we were asked to do?
Sorry, I asked Taylor the question.
Sorry.
Could Taylor answer the question?
Taylor, would you answer the question?
I'm trying to help you finish well here, okay?
This is why I'm coming off the podcast, because Tim and I are the same. I think that would be such a healthy. It's a weighty, right? It's got a lot of weight to it, but it's a healthy way to view transition as the one who's transitioning, which really puts the pressure on from the very beginning. Transition well. Before. In the church, like, let's be honest, guys, in the church, we should not have to have bad transitions.
Yeah,
you're right about that.
Unfortunately, we do. Sometimes it's just, I'm going to be frank. Sometimes we need to let people go because they didn't fulfill the assignment before them. Sometimes it's immoral things. We could go down a list. It doesn't always have to be that way. And hopefully we as those who are listening and us three, like we can make a dip in the change of that. But I think if we were to consider, like, when I leave, me fulfilling my assignment here is a matter of, right, it's not a matter of salvation, but it's a matter of sinning against the call of God on my life, sinning
Good
against
phrase.
my word. Then yeah, that would help. That would help me manage, as a, I'm thinking as a staff member, that would help me manage how I transition.
Yeah.
I think as I've been listening to this, there's one of the challenges with finishing well is that we don't feel like we have time to dream about the next place. So we start doing it while we're here. And I think when we make transitions, we need to schedule in, I'm going to end here and I need a couple of weeks before I start.
Yeah.
I need a chance to let go and begin to talk to the Lord and begin to engage. And I need time to emotionally transition, mentally transition, spiritually transition, and if you're moving, physically transition.
Sure.
Without the pressure of going right into the office.
Tim,
go ahead.
Sorry. I think one thing, hearing you say that, I would suggest, so we're talking a lot about leaving a place.
Yeah.
I think something for leaders and staff pastors and pastors to know going into a place. So you've left one, you're about to go into another. I've just kind of made a decision in my mind that wherever I go next, whenever that is, that this idea of let's hit the ground running, I get it. I get the concept of it, but I do think when I came to where I'm at now, I remember telling our pastor, hey, it's going to take me time. It's going to take me several months to get a feel of what we're doing, how I fit. And I would encourage our listeners, if you can, if your new church or your new pastor your new leader will afford it to you, ask them to have some couple weeks to adjust even once you get into the position. The whole idea of like hit it hard when you first come. I know where it comes from. I asked my pastor, set me up meetings. Give me 3 weeks of meetings with people that you think I need to know so that I can transition into the new role. Where's the landmines? Those types of things.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of it's about being strategic in the transitions.
Yeah.
As I've listened to this today, and been a part of the dialogue, my mind is reminded that part of our witness is in the health of our relationships, in the health of what the outside world sees.
Yeah.
And having healthy transitions, whether it be let me know ahead of time, and which is tough because it means I have to get over the fear as a person who feels like God might be asking us to leave or go do something else, to come and say, okay, feel like this is what the Lord's saying. And would you pray with me, or and take that journey with me? That's a serious risk coming to a leader, a pastor, and actually even as a pastor coming to a staff and saying, guys, I feel like God is saying this about my life, and I want to help begin to prepare y'all for the transition.
Yeah.
There's a moment of when you begin to sense those things, to say, let's pray together, and let's go on this journey together. If you really look at the fact, if we want to take a biblical model, Jesus began to prepare the disciples really early. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'm going to die. How many times did he talk to them about, I'm going to die. I'm going to leave this with you. He was preparing them for the transition early.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do that well, because we try to, I don't think we do that well, but that's something we could really pick up from Jesus in this.
Yeah. Well, and even as he was telling them, the disciples argued with him about him leaving.
It's true.
I mean, so we see even the tension with what Jesus was dealing with. But, and some of it is we just have to rid ourselves the guilt of what other people are going to do. You know, just because we do the right thing, that does mean sometimes people are going to do the wrong thing. But we've got to rid ourselves of the guilt of, well, someone may handle this incorrectly. You know, like you were talking about, Taylor, if you go to a pastor and he doesn't handle it correctly, you're still doing the right thing the right way. We can't not do the right thing in fear that someone else won't do the right thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm gonna put some, there's some good stuff that's gonna end up in the show notes. Taylor, for the last time, for the foreseeable future, as part of the podcast, unless you come back as a guest, what's your takeaway from this dialogue today?
Yeah. The biggest takeaway is, as a staff pastor, how much my transition is going to affect my lead pastor. Now, I have currently I have a great relationship with my pastor. I love, things are amazing here. So I kind of already would think that about where I'm at now, but maybe I wouldn't have thought that in other transitions. I would have thought it was all about me and not taking into consideration the pastor I'm serving. So that's a great reminder for me of this transition, not to get lost in myself in the transition, to think only about me, but there's a lot of people being affected by this.
What about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it would just be what Taylor said earlier about, setting the expectations of how they're going to leave from the beginning.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, because they are more willing to listen to what you have to say at the beginning than any other time, probably in their ministry. And so setting that expectation from the get-go, you hope that when that time comes that they do need to leave, they will remember that conversation you had from the very beginning. And I think that's big. And I think we neglect that because we sit and we think that everybody is going to stay with us forever. We have to adjust that mentality and realize that, people are going to leave and people are not always going to be with us.
Yeah. One of the things we teach people in our trainings is that, the people that got you here are not likely to get you to the next place. It's just part of the way the kingdom works.
That's never been more evident to me than this year.
So
hey, real quick, I know we're wrapping up. I remember being on staff a couple of churches ago. We had a preacher came in, and at the end of his message, he looked at our lead pastor and said, "Is a large church, several hundred people, and a big event." And he looked at our pastor and said, "Preacher, the team that got you here is not, in a year, they will not be the team that you currently have, or that you'll have." And I remember looking, me and the worship pastor looked at each other and we're both like, not us. And within 3 months, we both had made a transition.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
It's true.
Yeah.
So let me just first of all pose a question to the leaders that are out there, to those of you that are listening. Whether you're a subordinate, you're a lead pastor, doesn't matter. If you're leading, you've got people under you, and there's opportunities for you to transition out of what you're doing. What do you need to do to begin to build a healthy transition culture in your ministry now?
Yeah.
You could go back, if you didn't have that discussion when they come on, but what a great conversation to have in a staff meeting.
Yeah.
About that. And so let's do that. But last in this episode is, I want to give some honor at the end of the transition.
Yeah.
We picked on Taylor a lot, but we did a series of episodes last summer on spiritual heritage, and it was cool. We had 4 generations there, and Taylor's talking about me being his spiritual father, and the love that I have for him, that my wife has for him, that we have for him in this process. Truth is, when we decided to start a podcast, there was nobody I was willing to take the risk with that I trusted more and enough to jump off and take a risk with more than Taylor. So we're even here today because he was willing to go on the journey with us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that, Tim. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yep.
I've enjoyed it. I'll just know I've enjoyed it. I hope all of our listeners, I hope all of my big fans will stay involved and listening, and let your heart grow a little bit for Todd and his beard. And
wait a minute, I was just looking at you beard. Y'all are bearded, and I've got this gray beard that is lost in the light.
Well, you drink whipped cream on your hot chocolate, so that's why. Coffee puts hair on your chest,
Okay, I'm gonna let Taylor finish now.
Well, I just want to say, Taylor, thanks for being so cool about the whole transition, and I'll do my best to fill the big shoes of Taylor Schote. Yeah, because apparently Tim didn't trust me enough to make the big jump off the cliff. That's too much of a wild card from the beginning.
It's true. It's true. Now I've got it. I had to get a little bit of a pattern. So, all right.
That was a short jab in the midsection.
I was. What was the comment that one of the guys, and it wasn't one of these two guys in our evaluation. They said that we had a guest on last year, and they said, "Man, that was so good. He brought a little edge. There hasn't been edge." And I thought, "Oh heck!" And now we've got edge all the time.
Well, I'm happy to be the edge.
All right, love you, Taylor. Thanks, listeners, and we'll see you next week.
You guys.
This is now going to our weekly format, so we'll see you next week on the Advancement Podcast.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.